Welcome to the Nairobi Health Show, everyone. Today I have Dr. Kris Verburgh, who's traveling. And so I appreciate him being here because he's had to find a place where he could do this and get good audio. So, Kris, thanks for figuring that out.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I love your bio. I love your background, your resume, what you've done, and your interests. I'm really excited to share this with my audience. And so I'm just going to read your background really quickly, and then we'll dive more into what you're doing. Dr. Kris Verburgh is a medical doctor, researcher, and author with a strong interest in aging and longevity. He closely monitors new trends, developments, and paradigm shifts in medicine, those technologies that will disrupt medicine, healthcare, and our lifespans, and how the fourth industrial revolution will transform medicine. He has a deep interest in aging, which he has coined the term biogerontology for, also metabolism, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative diseases, etc., and neuroscience. He is the co-founder of NOVOS, the first science-based nutraceutical to address 9 important hallmarks of aging. He's written 4 books by the age of 28, and his first science book by the age of 16. You must have been just a little natural in school. I mean, I'm dying to hear the story of how you took up such an interest in science. And that being said, there's more we could read about you. You've obviously got degrees, and you are a medical doctor with a lot of experience in this field. But all this started very early. Why don't we go back to the beginning and tell us your story?
Yeah, great. So first of all, thank you for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure to talk about science, health, and longevity. So since a young age, I've been fascinated by the big questions. Where did the universe come from? Is there a boundary at the universe? What is life? Why do we have to die? Why does aging exist? So I think why we have to age and die is also one of the biggest questions we can ask ourselves. And so I, since a young age, I've been very fascinated by, what life constitutes and what is the reason why we eventually have to die and what aging is caused by. So, but I had a big interest in cosmology, so the universe, general relativity, quantum mechanics, and also had a big interest in biology. So, what makes something alive? How are we different from a rock? And so on. And also I had a big interest in neuroscience, so consciousness. Where does consciousness come from? What are dreams made of? What are memories made of? The human mind is absolutely fascinating. And actually, I'm also very interested in aging of the brain, where the two come together. Anyway, I always wanted to become a medical doctor. I knew that when I was already in kindergarten. Then I studied, became a medical doctor. In the meantime, I had written a few books when I graduated. So I had written 3 books when I graduated, and now I've written a 4th book by age of 28. I'm now 36, but anyway, I've written in total 4 books. My first book, as you said, when I was 16 years old, which was about big questions: cosmology, Big Bang, origin of our planet, our solar system, life. And my 2 latest books are about longevity and health and what we can do to live longer.
Interesting. So while the other kids are playing with toys, you were sitting there going, "How does my brain work?"
A little bit like that, yes. I did love playing with toys and so on. But yeah, I was always super curious, very critical. So if people or teachers said something, I always ask, why is this? And is this verified? And what are others saying? And so, I think it's come natural by always, being very inquisitive and always asking questions and looking for answers.
Your bio sounds somewhat similar to a famous American scientist here that we have called Sam Harris, who also had written his first bestseller in his graduate program. And so he had the fascinating, being in the fascinating position of studying neuroscience and having his advisors asking him questions about publishing. Which is, he found that to be...
Sounds familiar, yes?
Yeah. And I love his podcast, by the way. Are you familiar with Sam Harris and his podcast, Waking Up?
Yes, definitely, and also with other big thinkers like Steven Pinker. I especially like. He has
Yeah,
written
me
some
too.
great books about consciousness and the language instinct and human morality. Also, I think everyone, every teacher, especially, and every politician and every philosopher should read his book, The Blank Slate, which is about
Ah,
nature versus nurture. So, how much is instinct, how much is education or culture, and so on. And where does morality come from? And it's not, he shows very clearly through a lot of interesting studies and science that morality is partly, of course, let's say, created by culture, but also there are deep moral instincts rooted in us and also in other species. There is our famous experiments where two mice are put in a cage, and one mouse, every time when it pulls a lever, it gets food, but the mouse next to it, in the cage next to it, gets an electric shock. So the mouse that pulls the lever, it gets food, but then the other mouse is shocked. So the mouse stops doing it because it sees that his companion in the other cage get a shock. So if these mice didn't have the moral instinct, they just would keep pulling the lever to get the food, despite that their little buddy in the cage next door is being shocked. So and many other experiments show that there are even figments of morality or moral feelings in other creatures and so on. So it's very interesting research.
I love this whole field as well, and I dabble in it. I find it really fascinating. I heard a similar study recently where two different species were put in the cage, and the only the one was given food. And the first animal over time noticed the other animal wasn't getting food and broke the food in pieces and would eat its food and then open the gate and give the rest of the food to the other animal, which was of a different species. I can't remember the two species that were tested, but again, fascinating to this point of intrinsic morality. And that's an aspect from reading and preparing for this episode. I didn't know you were also interested in that subject, but I am as well. And I find it really interesting. And it's a very important topic we all need to understand. And I find it also interesting, Kriss, I don't know about you, but I find many of these things to be somewhat counterintuitive. In other words, there's a certain level of humility where we think we know stuff, we think we know how things work. And yet, oftentimes, the world does not work when tested. When our personal theses are tested, sometimes things are counterintuitive. And so we need to be open-minded and study these things and find out what it is that people are learning through these studies.
I absolutely agree. And science makes you very humble. I think that's one of
Right.
the beautiful things about science. If you look at how big the universe is, there are like hundreds, 300 billion stars in our galaxy, and there are hundreds of billions of galaxies in the visible universe, and many of them will probably have life, and it will be very unlikely that we will ever come in contact. But it's so humbling to see. One of my screensavers, it's a picture of the universe with all the different galaxies, and each galaxy contains, like I said, hundreds of billions of stars. And every time when I see the screensaver, I calm down, like, because our life is so hectic. We have these meetings, we have these obligations, we have things to pay, bills to take care of, and then you see the huge universe, and then it's like, whew, all right, so big, I'm so small. It makes you humble. And the same for biology. If you see how all life is intertwined, so bacteria also have DNA just like us, and you see other species, they have so much in common. And it doesn't just make you humble, it also makes you much more gentle for other species, because you know they have very much in common, and very likely other species have also consciousness, especially animals. If you look how their brains are built, you have a limbic system, you also have a frontal cortex, their neurons have the same DNA, and they work like exactly the same as us. It's the way they are hardwired and so on that makes some differences, but it makes us very humble, and it makes us, let's say, more generous and understanding of other beings on this planet. So I think science can definitely make life not just much more fascinating, but you're also more grateful too for the whole story that the Big Bang and then evolution and billions of years and of a cosmic and biological evolution now leading up us to having this conversation. It's very humbling.
Yeah, it's amazing. And one of your focuses in that regard, it sounds like you're a person who loves life. You want life to go on as long as possible, to live a long and happy life in harmony with the other species and animals and with this world. I love that point of view. And in the last 10 years, you have pointed out in your writings that science has just basically exploded. That's my words, not your words. But the hallmarks of aging, the things we've discovered about why we age and how we age. Kriss, why don't you share with us some of the things you've learned? You've written a paper. You wrote the paper. I'm not sure if you wrote it or whether you just referenced it. Hallmarks of aging. Can you talk to us about that?
Thank you for the compliment. I wish I had written it, but I reference to it. It's a famous paper explaining 9 reasons why we age. And it was a great paper because it laid a foundation and summarized a lot of findings of aging. I wrote some papers, and one paper I wrote was where I created a new field of science. It's called biogerontology. So it uses knowledge of the aging process to better give food advice, to better give dietary advice, and to better understand which diets and foods are healthy on the long term. So the better you understand why we age, you can better assess which foods or diets are good on the long term for longevity.
Well, tell us about that. And I don't expect you have memorized the 9, although you're a smart guy. Maybe you have, I don't know. But why don't you just summarize for it however you'd like to, the key points and takeaways from this Hallmarks of Aging paper?
Yeah, I definitely know them by heart, and I even proposed my own model a little bit with extra hallmarks of aging, because of course the 9 hallmarks or reasons why we age, they are not the only ones. There are other ones. Some of them they even actually forgot to include in the paper, like cross-linking. But on the other hand, it's a great starting point, because if you ask many medical doctors or other people, why do we age? At best, you get a vague answer like we age because of DNA damage. But we know it's much, much more complicated, and that there are many other reasons why we age besides DNA damage. So these 9 hallmarks are about that. I can definitely highlight a few important ones. So one hallmark of aging or reason why we age is epigenetic dysregulation. So that's our epigenome determines which genes are switched on or switched off. And the older we get, the more this system, this epigenetic, let's say, organization goes awry. So some pro-tumor genes are switched on, which actually should be switched off, which leads to aging-related increase in risk of cancer. Some housekeeping or maintenance genes are switched off, which also contributes to aging. Pro-inflammatory genes are switched on by the dysregulated epigenome, and that causes inflammation and so on. So this epigenetic dysregulation is an important reason why we age. Some scientists even think it's the most important reason. Why? Many reasons, but a few, like very quickly, we have seen recently in studies that it's possible to rejuvenate animals, to make old animals younger again. So to reverse aging, which is absolutely very fascinating, because previously research was always about slowing down aging, but not reversing it. It was thought that's impossible. But now we have seen these papers appearing where you have old gray mice with bald spots, and they have osteoporotic backs and muscle atrophy and so on, and cognitive decline. So they are old, but then they are epigenetically reprogrammed and they look young again. So their gray fur is shiny black again. Their muscle mass has increased. Their organs can regenerate better. So by this treatment, that reverses aging, you mitigate so many things that go wrong during aging, and that's very, very interesting. And it's actually not that difficult to do. You just have to upregulate in a cyclical way 4 proteins, Yamanaka factors, that can reprogram old cells to a younger state. So, and companies like Google even are now working on this. Like Google sister companies Calico, and they are looking into ways to rejuvenate humans. And I think we could go to a future where people will be perhaps very old, like 150 years old, but still look young. So that's the whole goal or idea behind this epigenetic or other ways to reverse aging. So epigenetic dysregulation is one reason why we age. Another reason is DNA damage, as I explained. Another reason is telomere shortening, so especially in fast dividing tissues, like immune cells or red blood cells or hair, skin cells or liver cells and so on. And those cells divide a lot and their telomeres get shorter, and that also contributes to aging. Another reason why we age is protein accumulation. So proteins are the building blocks and workhorses of our cells. So they carry out most of the functions of the cell. So our cells are full of protein. But when we get older, these proteins start to recycle in an erroneous way. So these proteins start to accumulate inside our cells and outside our cells, and that contributes also to aging. I take, for example, Alzheimer's disease. It's caused a significant contributor to Alzheimer's, and probably the biggest cause of this disease is accumulation of proteins inside and outside the brain cells like tau and beta amyloid, and the brain cells get suffocated by their own protein and other mass that accumulates, and they die off. And if like 20 billion cells die off that way, you get the first conspicuous symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. So then you have also other reasons why we age, like mitochondrial dysfunction. So the mitochondria are the, let's say, power plants of our cells. When we get older, these mitochondria become more and more dysfunctional, and that leads to fatigue, and the cells cannot maintain themselves well, and so on. By the way, mitochondria are super interesting because they were like billions of years ago separate bacteria, but then a large bacteria swallowed those small bacteria, and instead of digesting the small bacteria, the small bacteria stayed alive in the big cell, and the small bacteria became mitochondria, producing all the energy for the cell, or most of the energy. So actually we live and can walk around and talk and breathe thanks to little bacteria that live in our cells. We call them mitochondria, and they produce most of the energy that our cells need to perform their function. But these mitochondria, they do decline over time, and that also plays a role in aging-related diseases. Another reason why we age is a very interesting one. It's accumulation of senescent cells inside our body. More and more cells, normal cells, become senescent. So it means these cells, they are too damaged, and normally they should die, but the nature has a fail-safe mechanism. So if a cell becomes too damaged, or it kills itself, or it stops dividing, and that are senescent cells. The problem with senescent cells is they cannot really divide anymore, which is a fail-safe mechanism for cancer. So if a cell is too damaged, you don't want it to continue dividing, because then it can create cancer. So what nature has done, it says, okay, if the cell is too damaged, it stops dividing, but also it's not dying. So it's like a little zombie cell that sticks around, and it secretes substances that damage the healthy surrounding cells. So these senescent cells, they secrete pro-inflammatory substances, or they secrete substances that break down the glue that glues together the cells, and so on. And that also contributes to aging, because if you have a lot of senescent cells in your skin, that is one of the reasons why we get a thinner skin and why our skin becomes saggy and we get wrinkles. If we get senescent cells in our blood vessel walls, the blood vessel walls become unhealthy, and so on. So senescent cells is also a reason why we age, and a lot of companies are trying to create therapies to specifically kill off the senescent cells.
Interesting.
And then another mechanism why we age, it's called deregulated nutrient sensing. So it means our cells become less sensitive to nutrients. And that plays a role in diabetes, for example. If we eat a lot of sugar, we have a lot of glucose circulating in the bloodstream. This glucose needs to be processed very quickly, otherwise it will damage our body. And the cells become less sensitive to glucose and insulin. And that leads to insulin resistance, which is called diabetes type 2 when it's too severe. But when we get older, we all become more or less insulin resistant. And then you have stem cell depletion, but that's mostly caused by the reasons I already explained, like epigenetic regulation and so on. And you also have some hallmarks that were not mentioned in the paper, like cross-linking. So it means connections like sugar can create cross-links between the proteins that make up our tissues, and that makes our tissues more stiff and so on. So anyway, I can go on for a while, but let's...
no, that was great. You summarized an entire paper there, so I appreciate you doing that. Now, from all this, from all your research, from everything that you're doing, let me get personal just for a minute. Do you have a personal goal for longevity? Have you decided that based on what you've learned, that you can personally apply this to live an exceptionally long life?
Yeah, I can definitely apply it. I hope to live a long life. I'm really doing my best, but definitely, if you understand why we age, you can much better act on it.
Yeah.
And also, the best way to keep people healthy for the longest time is by going at the root cause of most diseases we get, like heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, cancer, it's all caused by aging. So by slowing down aging, you reduce your risk of all these diseases at the same time. So definitely. And if you better understand aging, you can much better act on it. So one of the first things I learned was that antioxidants don't really work that well to slow down aging. And so if you go into aging and how to live longer, the first thing you will encounter is take antioxidants, like vitamins and so on. But if you then go deeper, you quickly realize that antioxidants are not really very good to extend lifespan. Some antioxidants can even slow or reduce lifespan and increase mortality. And actually some substances are healthy because they are pro-oxidant. And if you exercise, for example, you create a lot of oxidative stress, which normally antioxidants, they reduce oxidative stress. But if you exercise, you stress the cells because they have to work much harder. You have to breathe more oxygen. So you create a lot of oxidative stress. And we actually see that's one of the reasons why exercise is healthy and so on. So some substances are healthy, but not because they are antioxidants. So anyway, so that's one thing you quickly learn. Don't rely on antioxidants, but there are many other substances that have shown or have good science behind them that they can slow down aging by acting on these fundamental aging processes I just explained, like alpha-ketoglutarate, which is an important substance for epigenetic maintenance. NMN, it's very important for epigenetic maintenance. Lithium, microdosed lithium, can, for example, improve the protein accumulation and reduce that. Glycine is a little amino acid that also protects proteins a little bit like a chaperone so that they accumulate less quickly. Fisetin reduces inflammation, which also plays a role in aging, and so on. So definitely, if you understand aging, you can much better see which are the best supplements and foods and diets and many other things you can do to live longer.
Yeah, and my audience is very interested in nutrition and exercise and supplements. And so from your research, Kriss, what kind of things have you learned nutritionally that you're applying, that you've seen, and maybe we'll take it from two sides. What foods are you focusing on the positive side to make sure you live longer? And what foods have you decided are really too harmful to your longevity and you've cut back or cut them out of your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. So nutrition and longevity have been a long standing passion of mine. There are many diets. There are hundreds of different diets, and I looked into many of them. And then you have governments with their own food recommendations, and like the US, and I looked into many other recommendations of many other countries, like in the UK and in Europe and so on. And it's very interesting that these recommendations can be sometimes quite significantly different. So anyway, but what's the best diet to live longer? I think I can summarize it very quickly. There are three important things. First of all, consume less animal protein. We see thousands of medical studies where too much animal protein can accelerate aging. I know about keto diets or where sometimes you eat a lot of protein and a lot of fat, but or paleo diets and so on. And often you feel better, but on the long term, it can accelerate aging, too much animal protein. So I would eat less red meat. And if you do eat animal protein, replace the red meat more with white meat like chicken or poultry in general, or fatty fish. And also what I do, I eat a lot of, I eat very little red meat. So that's meat from, that's like beef or pork and mutton and veal and so on. That's red meat. I eat a lot of, if I do eat meat, it's mainly chicken, so white meat, or it's fatty fish. I eat a lot of fatty fish. I eat like 4 or 5 times per week fatty fish like herring, salmon, mackerel, and I also eat fish roe, which are eggs of fish, which are very important for health. A lot of people don't eat fish roe, but fish roe contains specific forms of omega-3 fatty acids that you don't even find in normal fish. Normal fish contains triglyceride forms of omega-3, but fish roe contains lysophosphatidylate forms of omega-3, which can penetrate the brain much better. So anyway, so eat a lot of fish and fish roe and so on instead of red meat, and then of course I eat white meat. And in general, I don't eat too much animal protein. Secondly, very importantly, it's to make sure you consume a lot of healthy fats. So that's very important. So I eat a lot of olives, olive oil, fatty nuts, So seeds like chia seed and flaxseed and so on. That's very important to consume more healthy fats. And then third simple rule is, of course, less sugar. Everyone knows that. So less soda and less sugary foods, so very little sweets and cake and candy bars and so on. If I'm hungry, I eat a little bit of dark chocolate with some nuts and a bit of fruit like an apple or a banana. So that's what I eat as an alternative. And then, of course, importantly, that's something less people know. It's to consume actually less starchy foods. So it means consuming less bread, potatoes, pasta, rice, and replace your pasta, your rice, and let's say other starchy foods like potatoes more with other vegetables. So instead of potato mash, I eat broccoli mash. Instead of rice, I eat mushrooms. Instead of pasta, I eat lentils or beans or peas. I just eat very little starchy foods. So
Do you eat a lot of legumes?
Yeah, I replace my potatoes mainly and my pasta and rice mainly by legumes. So I eat a lot of beans like cannelli beans and lentils and sometimes I replace them with mushrooms and so on.
Interesting. And of course, mushrooms are an amazing food, and I think very underrated. Have you seen Fantastic Fungi yet on Netflix?
It's on my to-watch list. Yeah, definitely. So
It's
I
kind of
really want to see it.
mind-blowing.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing. I need to go through it again. I like you, I had it on my watch list for quite a long time. And my wife is a birth assistant and a doula and apprenticing to be a midwife. And so she goes out on a lot of births. And so I end up at home alone in the evening, And finally one night, I'd given up on trying to talk her into watching it because it just doesn't. And I found that with a lot of people, it doesn't sound that interesting. So I just thought, I'm just going to watch this. It really did. Really did blow me away. Also, when I was getting my certification in fitness nutrition, through Precision Nutrition, which is a top 5 worldwide nutritional certification, I was amazed at the information they provided about mushrooms as they went through the phytonutrients of various foods and what they contained. When they did it cross-sectioned by category, like best foods to eat to get, vitamin A, vitamin, the B vitamins, C vitamins, these minerals, these foods, all the phytochemicals. Mushrooms kept falling into category after category after category. Really surprising. So that's a cool one. You said instead of rice, you eat mushrooms.
Yeah, so my rice, I replace them, or other starchy food like potatoes, I replace them mainly with 3 things: mushrooms, other vegetables, or I replace them with legumes. So actually, it's very easy. And actually, yeah, the mushrooms are definitely very healthy. There are a lot of great studies behind them. They can reduce the risk of cancer, including stomach cancer, and they can make the immune system stronger. And they're very good for your microbiome and so on. So mushrooms
Right.
very interesting, but also they are interesting for what they actually don't contain and replace. So if you replace your potatoes with mushroom or your rice with mushrooms, so that's much better because potatoes, rice, pasta, they cause high sugar peaks. And these sugar peaks, they cause glycation and they activate aging pathways like insulin receptors and IGF receptors, which are pro-aging mechanisms and so on. And you get a lot of cross-linking. And just using the mushrooms to replace the potatoes, which I often call empty foods or empty calories. So pasta, rice, potatoes, they mainly provide calories and they contain not that many micronutrients. You have so much. So replacing those foods more with mushrooms or legumes, or just another kind of vegetable. So you have like a plate with some, let's say, white meat or fatty fish. And then you have some vegetables, and then instead of the potatoes, you use a second portion of different vegetables. Like I said, you can use potato mash or cauliflower mash, or the second kind of vegetables, and so it worked very well.
I love sweet potatoes. It would be hard for me to give up sweet potatoes. I will often roast sweet potatoes with onions and peppers and a variety of other vegetables, and I just love that. But I realize it's maybe healthier than potatoes, but it's still a starchy vegetable.
Yeah, indeed. But I think now and then I'm not against potatoes in general. I'm just saying, like, we eat too many of
We
these
eat too
empty
many.
starchy calories.
Yeah.
But potatoes now and then, and whole grain pasta and brown rice, that's okay if you do eat it now and then. And make sure
Yeah.
you really eat a lot of vegetables. And definitely, as you say, the sweet potatoes, they are a much better alternative to general potatoes. Or yeah, so definitely, so they are great and they are very tasteful. So definitely, I can recommend that.
Okay, now let's talk supplements. I'm in the supplement field. I don't know if you looked at my website or anything before we started, but we have Dirobi.com, and we have a variety of products that we sell, everything from a multivitamin and minerals to a digestive aid and things like that. And one of my premises, Kriss, is that through blood work, we can find out what our deficiencies are, and that we ought to be not overusing supplements. I think too many people rely too much on supplements. And yet we've also found that it's quite difficult to get all the nutrients we need through diet alone, even when we're eating very clean. Now, one of the things you discuss is what blood tests don't tell you. And so I'm interested in that because I do like blood tests. I do them regularly. I like to know what's going on. And mostly from a nutritional point of view. Like, I want to know if I'm deficient on B vitamins, on chromium or zinc, or calcium, magnesium. I like to be aware of that and then adjust my diet accordingly. But one of your talking points is blood tests don't tell us everything. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and we can talk for hours about that because it's such a complicated topic, and
Right.
I love it because it's so complicated. And so yeah, so that's a great question. So in general, I think blood tests are definitely useful. They are interesting to measure LDL, HDL, cholesterol. Of course, ideally, you measure glycation of the cholesterol too, and the size of the cholesterol particles, and so on. But anyway, in general, it's a good way to to track your health. Blood tests, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say for to track down nutrition deficiencies, I would not over rely on your blood test because a lot of people have a normal blood test, but they can still be deficient in a lot of micronutrients like in magnesium, potassium, and so on, calcium, so many vitamins and minerals.
Yeah.
Because most blood tests, they are not that accurate, unfortunately. So,
I
uh,
see.
so I. I'm a bit reserved about you can use it as a guideline, especially for tracking metabolic biomarkers like cholesterol or inflammatory biomarkers like inflammation and so on. But for tracking deficiencies, I would not overrely on them because for most people, like for example, magnesium can be normal according to your blood test, but you can still be deficient because magnesium is also found inside cells, and you just measure magnesium in the bloodstream. It's not all that telling. Same for
Okay.
potassium. For example, potassium, it will be almost always normal in your blood. So you cannot say, oh, your potassium is low, and then I need to act. No, because if your potassium is not normal, according to your blood test, you're often dying or you're very sick. Because only then, if you have like massive kidney failure, then your potassium levels are deranged. So you should not,
Interesting.
but you still can be potassium deficient. Actually, a lot
Right.
of people are potassium deficient. I think it's a big problem. I think it's the forgotten electrolyte. But anyway, and the same for so many other nutrients like vitamin B12 will be mostly normal according to your blood test, even if you measure it intracellularly. So you can also sometimes measure it, vitamin B levels not in the bloodstream, but the vitamin B levels inside the red blood cells and so on. But even that's not that accurate. So more
Wow.
accurate measurement of vitamin B12 is to look in the urine at a specific metabolite of vitamin B12. It's methylmalonic acid, and even that is not that accurate. So, and a lot of medical doctors, they over rely on blood tests, even also for thyroid dysfunction. So they will look at thyroid dysfunction. They will look at TSH, which is your thyroid stimulating hormone, and they will say if it's across a specific value, then only then you have thyroid problems. But they don't realize enough that TSH levels can fluctuate a lot during the day, and it's actually not that accurate.
Right.
If you look into scientific studies, it's not accurate really to measure, let's say, iodine status or thyroid health by looking at TSH levels. But almost every doctor is doing that. So
Okay.
to answer that problem, what I actually do It's just I take enough of everything to make sure I'm really not deficient. So I take extra potassium, I take extra calcium, because I don't drink milk, by the way, and so on. I take extra magnesium because it's the best way to make sure you take enough is by just taking it. So and that's how I go about it. And
Okay. So this is really interesting to me because I've been teaching a little bit differently, and of course, I'm always learning. I'm always open to do things differently. Let me see if I've got one here. So our multi, Kriss, this is our Mimi's Miracle Multi. And in this multi, we have taken the research from the last 10 years or so of biohacking and what most people tend to be deficient in and put them in there. So it's somewhat along the lines of your approach, except we purposely excluded things that might counteract. For example, zinc doesn't play nicely with magnesium. And so we don't want to take our zinc and our magnesium at the same time. Now, your approach, I'm liking this. I like this idea. You're a scientist. You put a lot of time and energy into this. And what you're saying is you're supplementing everything. Now, I have not been doing that personally. So for example, my last mineral test, I was a little bit low on potassium, not deficient, just a little bit low. And so I started eating a banana every day. I hadn't been eating bananas at all. And so my wife does the shopping in our house. I said, hey, could you make sure we always have bananas? I'm going to eat a banana every day. Hopefully my next mineral test will show that my potassium is okay. And I generally err on the side of food. I want to get all of my phytonutrients from food as much as possible. And I've just found over time those things I can't get. Now, in your world, though, you are currently taking, so are you offsetting when you take some of these things? For example, taking magnesium in the evening can help a person sleep. So do you have like a morning and an evening routine, or you're breaking up when you take your supplements? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, definitely. So as you said, for example, some supplements don't go well together, like zinc and copper. It's a famous example. So I take them separately. I take zinc in the morning and copper in the midday or evening. Same for calcium and iron. Calcium inhibits the absorption of iron, so I don't take them together. So I take my calcium before I go to bed, and in the afternoon, and in the morning I take my iron. So I definitely thought about that, and it's great to hear your supplement takes that into account, because definitely you cannot take everything at once, because they can counteract each other, absorption and efficacy and so on. So definitely agree with that. And also, what I do is I eat very healthy, but I realized that even if you eat super healthy, it's almost impossible to get all the micronutrients. And I can talk for a very long time why that's the case. Because first of all, our bodies are not made by nature to properly absorb all nutrients. People think that. They think perhaps in prehistoric times we had everything. No, nature is not perfect. Evolution is not perfect. And we are absolutely not made by nature to, even if you eat a healthy, varied diet, like the FDA is saying, and many other countries are saying, they say if you eat a healthy diet, you don't need supplements. I absolutely don't buy that. And there's a lot of science showing that that's absolutely not the case. And that's so wrong. For I can also talk for a long time about that. But the first big argument against that notion is that nature has not made our bodies to absorb everything properly. Even if you eat healthy, it's very difficult to get enough iodine, for example, because iodine, it's a little bit in eggs and so on, but it's mainly seaweed. But most people don't eat every week seaweed. And also, even eating seaweed, it contains too much iodine at once. So iodine is super difficult to get through food. So I think there's a big iodine deficiency going on in the US and in Europe and so many other places. And the same for many other ingredients like magnesium. Even if you eat healthy, you still, it's very difficult to reach the 400 or 500 milligrams of magnesium. The same for potassium. You eat healthy, and then you eat on top of that a banana contains about 300 milligrams of potassium. That's all good, but ideally you need 4.7 grams of potassium. So even if you eat very healthy, and even if you eat bananas, even 2 or 3, it will be still difficult to reach even the 4.7 grams. And in prehistoric times, even sometimes about 7 to 11 grams of potassium per day. So I think even if you eat super healthy, it's almost impossible to get all nutrients for an optimal lifespan, because nature didn't make our bodies to do that. So actually, if you look at prehistoric times, And in the last thousands of years, iron deficiency has always been a huge problem. Iodine deficiency was always a huge problem for our species, and so many other deficiencies. And I actually think a lot of people in the West feel like bad the whole time. They have sleep problems, they have concentration problems, they have muscle aches when they get up, they don't have enough energy. And I think it's because they miss so many micronutrients. Because if you look at the studies, 75% of people is magnesium deficient. And actually, if you measure it in their blood, they will almost all be normal. But it's only if you calculate it according to the foods they eat, and then you see how much magnesium there is in the food, then it's impossible to get enough magnesium, despite that they have normal magnesium levels. Same for vitamin E. I take it. That's an exception, by the way, to what I'm trying to make clear here. Vitamin E, it's very difficult to get it properly through supplements, because often in supplements it's artificial vitamin E and so on. And that's the only thing I really try to consume, mainly through food. So I eat a lot of sunflower seeds every day to get my 15 milligrams of vitamin E, or almonds or hazelnuts.
Did you say 15 milligrams?
Of vitamin E? Yeah, you can go much higher, definitely. But that's what the FDA recommends to, at least, and I tend to go higher. So, but I try to get it through food. But on top of my healthy food, I eat the flax seeds and the almonds to get natural vitamin E, because there are 8 different forms of vitamin E. And often in supplements, it's only one form of vitamin E. It's alpha tocopherol, and not the other tocopherols and the tocotrienols and so on. So that's a bit of an exception. But just saying, even if you eat healthy, I think you do need supplements, unfortunately. And yeah, that's how I go about it.
So you take quite a few, and now you've also developed a supplement. Is that right? NOVOS?
That's correct, but that's actually something different than what we were talking about. So because we were talking about health supplements, I call these health supplements versus longevity supplements. So I think health supplements are vitamins and minerals and other micronutrients you need for a proper life, for proper cellular functioning. So magnesium and omega-3s and so on. Yeah.
And so let me stop you there, because I would like to see your complete list. Do you have that on your website or anywhere?
Actually, yes, I have, because a lot of people were asking that. So what I did, I published on novoslabs.com the ultimate longevity regimen. And that's my whole supplement regimen. And that's a lot. So it also contains phosphatidylcholine. It contains potassium salt to increase my potassium intake, and then many supplements. So it's definitely a long list. But these are health supplements. So you also have longevity supplements, which are more different. They have shown to extend lifespan in multiple species, and they work on inherent aging mechanisms. And these are things like microdose lithium, or alpha-ketoglutarate, or fisetin, or glycine, and so on.
And those are the ingredients you've put in. Is it pronounced NOVOS?
Yeah, well, you can pronounce it as you like. It's called NOVOS often.
Yeah. And that basically is the result of all the research that you and your colleagues have done, and decided that based on the current science that we have, if we put all these things in one supplement, and these are based on the Hallmarks of Aging paper, that you're covering all of the bases of that paper and putting a supplement together that ideally would complement the diet and the nutrition and all these other supplements to directly counteract these effects of aging.
Indeed. So we created NOVOS. It contains 12 ingredients that have a lot of science behind them, in the sense that they can act on inherent aging pathways. So these are the aging mechanisms we previously discussed, like epigenetic dysregulation, mitochondrial dysfunction, protein accumulation, and so on. So these 12 ingredients act on those fundamental aging processes. And also each ingredient has shown to extend lifespan or mitigate important aging-related symptoms, and so on. And we created this nutraceutical out of frustration that there are so little science-based supplement companies out there to address aging. A lot of supplements, they still think about, in the context of antioxidants, or they for anti-aging, or they provide specific substances that have very little science behind them. So we looked into the thousands of papers, the medical literature about longevity and life extension studies, and we identified the 12 most promising ingredients, together with our scientific advisory board, which consists of actually one of the biggest leaders in the aging field. We have Professor George Church from Harvard University. We have Jean Pedro de Magalhães, who is a very famous longevity researcher. If there is a longevity conference going on, he's probably speaking there. We have Professor Pamela Mayer, who is an authority on flavonoids and longevity and brain aging. So we have a great scientific advisory board with top scientists in the longevity field, and we worked with them to identify 12 of the most promising and interesting ingredients to tackle aging, and the result is called NOVOS.
Very cool. And is that a European-based company, or do you have distribution in the US?
We are a US-based company.
Okay.
So my co-founder is based in the US, and we are actually a global company because some of our advisors in other countries and so on. But we are mainly based in the US.
It sounds expensive.
Well, we try to keep the price as low as possible. So
Okay.
because a lot of these ingredients are very, let's say, unique, and we really wanted specific forms of the ingredients, and they are often expensive, like alpha-ketoglutarate. So there are a lot of studies showing that alpha-ketoglutarate extends lifespan and also reduces hair graying in mice and baldness and so on. It acts on the epigenome, and it improves mitochondrial dysfunction and so on. So alpha-ketoglutarate, very interesting, but we want the calcium form, calcium alpha-ketoglutarate, because that's a form that has been used in the longevity studies, where it also has shown to extend lifespan in mice and so on. And also the calcium form has the advantage, it releases the AKG more slowly and so on. So that's why we specifically want calcium alpha-ketoglutarate and not the normal alpha-ketoglutarate you can find in other supplements. Same for example, NMN. So we have, besides NOVOS Core, which contains 12 ingredients to tackle aging, we also have NOVOS Boost, and that's NMN. And our NMN is very high quality, and it has been double checked independently by 2 labs that assess the purity and so on, because there's a lot of like impure or adulterated NMN online. And so we really want to make sure that the ingredients we use are top notch. The supplements also manufactured in the US according to all GMP standards and so on. And we really want the best ingredients, and we want it for the best price. So actually, if you really want to go and buy it separately, all those 12 ingredients plus NMN, it will be much, much more expensive. And I that was very important for me and my co-founder to really provide this longevity nutraceutical for the best price possible. And also, we give a lot of things for free on our website. So with our website, we just don't want to be a company that provides nutraceuticals. We also want to be a platform for longevity. So we give away a lot of advice and insights on how to live longer, how to improve your skin, what's the best longevity diet. You can download the longevity diet poster and stick it on your refrigerator, so you can immediately see what's a healthy diet and so on. So we really want to help people. And we also will provide tests on our website where people can take the best tests, biological tests, to assess their biological age, and to assess their health in general.
Oh, that's terrific. I'm always looking for good tests. I try to do I'm kind of an amateur biohacker, you know. I'm not as serious as the people that really are into biohacking, but every 6 months I do try to do some form of test. My last one was a GI tract test, and before that I did a mineral test, and before that I did a general nutritional panel. But I am aware of the things that you said, of when you take the test, whether you're in a fasted state. There's a lot of, everything you said about testing is true actually in a lot of testing. Like, for example, testosterone. Many men are diagnosed with low testosterone, but it's a huge difference if the test is taken in the morning or the afternoon, or even in a certain week versus another week, or whether there's a high level of exercise and so on. And so I totally track with you on that. The tests can be all over the map. In other words, guys, if you're listening right now and you got a low testosterone test, don't just suddenly make big decisions and commit yourself to hormone replacement therapy after one test. Maybe wait a couple of weeks, do a couple natural things, maybe exercise a little bit more, and eat foods that are healthier, cut back on the bad foods, and take another test. And so, Kriss, this is just kind of a common theme in testing. We can't accept these things as the Bible truth of what's exactly happening in our body every time we get a test. And so that's exciting. So you guys have come up with tests that you have more confidence in, and that you've taken some of those things into account, and you're offering them on your website.
Yeah, we will offer them in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
So one test will be an epigenetic test. So these tests are very good at tracking your biological age. Currently you can do a blood test, but it's not that telling. Like I also mentioned, a lot of blood tests are normal. Of course, like I said, I'm not against blood tests. They're definitely interesting for some biomarkers. But if you want to have a general idea, like what's my risk of dying? It's very difficult to do it through normal tests. So we use a novel kind of test. It's called the epigenetic aging clock test. And it looks at the epigenome. So it looks at many hundreds of different locations of the epigenome, whether the DNA is methylated or not. And according to that pattern, AI and complex algorithms can analyze the methylation pattern on your DNA. It's related to how fast you're aging, and it can determine your biological age. So, for example, someone can be 50 years old chronologically, but if that person eats unhealthy, doesn't exercise, doesn't sleep well, then perhaps that person is biologically 58 years old and not 50 years old. And these tests, these epigenetic tests, want to determine your real biological age. Are you much older or younger than your chronological age? And that's related, your biological age, to your mortality risk. If you, according to some epigenetic tests, if you are like 50 years old, but biologically you're 58 years old, you have double the risk of dying. And that's quite significant to know. And vice versa. So, for example, my mother, she did an epigenetic test a long time ago. She was like 7 years younger. So that's good. And anyway, so these tests are very interesting to have a much better holistic view on how old you are, and then you can retest every 6 months or every year to see if you can rejuvenate yourself biologically.
Yeah, these things kind of drive me nuts. There's a lot of bio tests. Yours is probably more advanced than some of the ones we have done, but it's interesting because I'm a health nut. I'm really into exercise, diet, supplements, the whole health world. Obviously, I'm doing a health podcast, and I love this whole thing, and I'm really into it. Okay. My wife, she takes it about half as seriously as me. She's generally health conscious. She exercises. She's not too strict about her diet. And so I work my butt off, and then the two of us go and we get like a bio test, and she shows being like 15 years younger than she really is. And I'm like 3, So I'm 56 right now. I might take the test and it shows I have a biological age of 53. And she like blows these tests out every single time. So it kind of drives me nuts. But anyways, it's an interesting area.
It depends on which test she takes, because often these tests are not that accurate. So perhaps it can be still that you're younger than your wife. I don't know, but I think it's very difficult to find. What we use for our tests, we really try to use tests that are scientifically validated by a lot of other researchers, and that use thousands of participants to calibrate those aging clocks. And I think a lot of tests online offer this claim to measure your health or aging and so on. But the algorithm is often not peer-reviewed. It's not published in the medical or scientific literature. So you just have to take their word. Is your wife really 15 years younger? Or is it just based on a few biomarkers that are not very well correlated to longevity and disease and morbidity and so on? So I don't know anything about which test you take, but of course I can look into them and then determine. But I would then need to know the specificity, sensitivity, the test sizes and so on, and whether it's published and not, to really assess whether that test is indicative enough.
I'll tell you the real test, though, that probably would affirm this is as scientific as it gets. When she's out with our daughters, people think she's their sister. So
that also works quite well. So yeah, definitely. There are a lot of studies showing that if people look younger, they actually often biologically are younger, because how you look your face, it's all it's all related with how, of course, your body, even the skin.
Right.
It's often the skin is indicative of your blood vessel health because they are made of the same materials. Your skin is made of collagen and elastin, and your blood vessels too. So often people who have a lot of wrinkles for their age, often they all have unhealthy blood vessels and vice versa. So it's all interconnected, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Kriss, I could keep you here for hours. Obviously, you have a wealth of knowledge in this area, but we've only got so much time. Thank you for giving us as much time as you have. And tell us, how do people learn more about you? You've already said your website, but tell us one more time your website and a few of the things that they can do there.
Yeah, definitely. So if people are interested in longevity and health and food to live longer, they can read my book. It's called The Longevity Code. And there you find a lot of things we discussed, and also biotech to live longer, but it's mainly about nutrition, which diets are best to live longer, and so on. So the book's called Longevity Code, and you can find it on Amazon or in a lot of bookstores. You can also follow me on Twitter. On Twitter too, by the way. I publish mostly their scientific papers. You also can follow me on Instagram. So it's always just Kris Verburgh, my name written together, Kris with a K. And then if you want to learn more about longevity, you can also go to our website, novoslabs.com, where, as I discussed, novoslabs.com, it's a platform with a lot of tips on how to live longer, how to optimize your sleep. We have a post about the best sleep gadgets. We have a post about the best longevity diets, post about the best ways to fast, because that's also very interesting, and so on. So it's like a platform. And there you can also take some aging tests already. So you can take, for example, skin age tests. So it's AI that you upload a selfie, and it kind of the AI tries to assess your age that way. And so it's just a platform where you can find a lot of information to live longer, healthier lives.
Well, fantastic, Kriss. And I understand you're doing this podcast from Brussels. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm currently for a brief time in Belgium, and I will soon leave for New York. And I was in Boston earlier to visit some biotech labs, so I'm a bit all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you been to Bruges?
Definitely, yeah. I can definitely recommend it. Bruges is nice, but a lot of people don't know about Ghent. So it's very close to Bruges, and I like Ghent more. It's more like Renaissance architecture. Bruges is more like a very old, medieval, beautiful architecture. But I like Ghent more. So it's perhaps interesting to know if you're in Belgium. It's very tiny, so everything's very close by. So actually going to Bruges or Ghent is very easy to do both actually. Yeah.
Well, fantastic. If we may ever make it back to Belgium, that we'll add that to the list. Thanks for the tip.
Wonderful.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you so much, Kris, for being on the show.
Great. Yeah, my pleasure. And thank you for the great questions and the very nice discussion. So I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Me too. And for those of you listening, this is Dave Sherwin wishing you health and success.